Hi everyone, welcome. We're down here in my wormery preparing to check in on these two worm bins here. These are ENCs, that's my abbreviation for European nightcrawler worms. And these worms have been in these tubs for 77 days now, that's 11 weeks. And I think they're due for feeding because 12 days have passed since the last time we checked in on these little guys. I'm pretty sure we gave them a fairly generous portion of food, but still, I think we're ready to check in on them again. So we're going to get them up on the bench and we're going to see how they're coming along. So let's get to work. Often my bins are just kind of very vanilla worm composting systems. Throw in the kitchen scraps, have a nice day, see you in a couple weeks. But in these, we're doing something a little bit different. We're running a little bit of a test. And I mean, we kind of know what the outcome of the test is going to be because we know it's a proven fact that worms will not only eat your kitchen scraps, but they can pretty much break down any compostable organic materials. And in the case of these two systems, you can already see a little hint of it peeking out here through the material. We're running a test material in these two systems. We're running cotton. We gave each system 32 days ago, a little bit over a month ago, we gave each system a t-shirt. And when we first put the t-shirts in here, we had wrapped some potato peels within the t-shirts, and it seemed like the worms hadn't really done much with it. We came in there and it seemed like we were even seeing some leftovers of the potato, but then we gave them some more. I think the feeding was almost like a carbon copy of the previous feeding. I think they really just got more potato that next time. But I think we might have also added a little something else that might have piqued their interest, or I'm not sure what it was that seemed to cause a slightly different outcome, because the next time we checked in there, it did seem like the worms had taken a shine to checking in on the t-shirts and climbing into them to get at the kitchen scraps we had left for them. So I guess it just sometimes takes a little time for the worms to warm up to new things being added to their environment. And I guess there is a little bit of a kind of an obstacle in the way. I mean, if you're trying to get at some kitchen scraps that have been folded into a couple of t-shirts, I guess the very challenge of getting into the t-shirt itself is the possibly the tricky part. So that might have had something to do with the so-so results of the first round of putting food into the t-shirt to see what the worms think of it, but then subsequent check-ins did seem like things were improving. So we were hoping to further improve things in here by changing things again. So the way I changed things last time was that I not only did I sort of put food in there and then wrap it all up within the t-shirts, but I had actually so basically the t-shirt is folded over twice. So I put food in once, folded it back one piece of it, and then put more food on top of that folded over the last piece, and then even put more food on top of that. So we kind of layered a whole bunch of food in on these t-shirts last time to really see if we can get the worms to make a much more concerted effort on nibbling away at the t-shirts. And you know, there's just like, I guess, some fine print here, because I don't want anyone to think that 32 days in the worm bin is going to produce types of results that you're seeing here, because these t-shirts already had a significant head start from the perspective that they were all torn and had big rips in them anyway, and they were quite old. And I believe that we have to sort of take our observations and note the progress with a little bit of a kind of a keen eye, factoring in the consideration that these t-shirts were already full of holes. So just the fact that we're seeing how they're kind of torn up and falling apart already, I wouldn't necessarily contribute to the worm activity per se. Not to say that the worms aren't doing anything. I mean, I'm sure that they are nibbling on the t-shirts, on the cotton, gradually helping to break this stuff down and consume this stuff, especially if we keep piling delicious foods on and in the fabric. But still, I figured I would be up front, just so nobody gets any sort of misconceptions on what to expect here or what's really going on. This was one thing I wasn't too keen on, was the presence of little bits of leftover pattern or design, or whatever it is that you want to call it, but all these little things that had been the design on the shirt are not going to be eaten, because I don't believe that those are compostable materials. So all these little bits of blue and green that made up the writing are going to start fragmenting into little pieces, kind of littering our compost here. So I think at some point I'll probably have to adopt the practice of gradually picking all these little bits out over time. And luckily they're all kind of bright, obvious colors, but I think it's still early enough in the game that we're not going to have to worry too much about it. So I'm just going to leave it all be, but I'm already anticipating the need for dealing with all this debris that these t-shirts are bringing with them. Almost makes me wonder if we should just abandon this and maybe use stuff that's got a better chance of breaking down. Well, as long as they stay large pieces like this, perhaps at some point later in the game we could even use a screen to separate these things, because they are kind of large fields. Hopefully they'll stay that way. I don't know. I'm starting to wonder if we've made a mistake by choosing shirts with this sort of a pattern on them, or this type of material used to create the pattern on them. Well, whatever, live and learn. I just don't like the idea of my compost having all kinds of debris in it that'll never break down, because my aim is at some point to use this stuff out in my garden. And I'd like to think that this stuff is all organic material that's gradually all going to break down, not be a bunch of litter out in my yard. Oh, here again we're starting to see pretty heavily torn up t-shirts, and I'm not even so sure it's just tears that I had put into the shirts or wear that occurred on the shirts due to my use of them as clothing, or if it's already early signs of the worms starting to do away with this stuff. It would be nice to think that the worms are actually responsible for a large part of what we're seeing here, but I think it's also possible to factor in the likelihood of it not being all contributable to the worms. So you can see there's a good number of worms hanging out down here. We knocked off the majority of the ones that were hanging out on the fabric. And I guess what I'd really like to do is lay in today's feeding in such a way that it's going to, once again, draw the attention of the worms and get them crawling all over the fabric. So I've got some frozen kitchen scraps here of all different types, as well as coffee, and the traditional accompaniment to my coffee is a little bit of worm chow getting sprinkled in there as well. I've also got a little bit of a novelty item. I pulverized a whole bunch of corn cob. That's corn cob that included the corn kernels as well, and I've got a little bit of that left in this container, which I thought we'd include with today's feeding too. So those are all the things that I was intending to place into the feeding zone along with the shirt, but in such a way that hopefully we can motivate the worms to spend time on and in the shirt, presumably nibbling away at the stuff gradually. It does seem like last time, at least, the shirts were much more, I don't know, intact. Like I could really still see the overall structure of the shirt, where I can, have a large flap that I can fold over after I've placed in some food, but it does seem like it's becoming a little bit more hard to distinguish stuff as easily. But I did like the idea of kind of having like a lower level of material onto which we could place some food, and then once again, like we did last time, fold over additional layers of fabric and then pile even more food on, so that we can continue this thing that we started with the worms really spending a good amount of time in the fabric, presumably nibbling on it while also enjoying the yummy kitchen scraps that we're giving them in these feedings. So I might eventually perfect the method here, but I'm still sort of making it up as I go along, if you haven't noticed already. Here I think I've left myself with a good number of flaps of fabric that we can fold over onto itself after we've nested a little bit of additional yummy foods down within the fabric. So let's start bringing in the foods. So it's mostly frozen. I bought in a block of frozen material, but then there's also these cores of peppers which are not frozen. I had just bought those down here so I can remove the seeds. I've been collecting seeds from mainly cantaloupes and peppers and letting them dry so that at some point I can include them in my worm chow recipe. So that's what I've got going now as far as my most recent batch of worm chow. It's got a good amount of pepper seeds mixed into it. And it's a good thing the worms can't really sense spiciness because a good number of the peppers are spicy. So I could feel it even on my hands as I'm picking through one of these jalapeno innards to get the seeds off. Afterwards I could feel the stinging on my hands, and sometimes I even make the mistake of reaching up and touching my face or my lips or something and sensing the additional sting. So these feeding zone indicators, I think we're just going to include these down here as supplemental bedding with today's feeding, since we've got more coffee and additional coffee filters that can come in as replacement for the feeding zone indicators. So why don't we segue right into giving them the coffee right on top of this folded over layer, which includes the old feeding zone indicator. And then we'll save the feeding zone indicators to rest on top to show us where we last fed. I mean, it's usually pretty straightforward and easy enough to find our way back to the spot where we last fed, but I like to lay down feeding zone indicators as a little bit of a tradition. So that's my worm chow. Got a pretty nice consistency. I wasn't sure what to expect by using materials that I'd not yet used before. I mean, I used the bird seed, which is one of the staple ingredients that I include in my worm chow mix usually. It was just all those it was all those additional cantaloupe seeds and pepper seeds that I didn't quite know what to expect from them. And I figured this top layer could be maybe this sprinkled up sprinkling of ground up corn cobs. And I got a pretty good collection of corn cobs coming together once again upstairs, and I've been keeping them in my freezer. But I was thinking perhaps the next time the oven needs to get used to bake something, maybe I would throw them in there to start drying them off, because I was able to grind this stuff up so nicely into this nice consistency because the stuff had actually been dried to a certain point. I received these corn cobs from my mom, and she took the time to throw them in the oven at her house, so she gave them to me sort of partially dried already. And then I even went another step beyond that by chopping the corn cobs up into smaller pieces and then letting them sit outside in the sun for the better portion of a nice sunny day, further drying them, I believe. And then when I put them into the little personal blender, they ground up so nice and easy and turned into this really nice sized particle matter. I've already gotten some feedback from some people who have done similar things, prepping foods for their worms, and they're telling me that I should be able to expect a pretty good reception on that stuff, because the worms are definitely going to appreciate it and they're going to gobble it up. So I think we're in pretty good shape here. We somehow managed to preserve some of this leafy matter that's scattered out across the top surface, which I like to see in some of my bins. Maybe at some point in the future we'll apply even more. I mean, we didn't even really include any fresh bedding today. We did recycle the old feeding zone indicators, which kind of went in as supplementary bedding with the feeding, but I would say that other than that, we didn't really give them anything new. I guess from a certain point of view, I'm kind of wanting them to treat the t-shirts, the cotton, as the bedding and the carbon-rich food source that I want them to nibble on should they be in the mood for that sort of stuff, rather than, you know, satisfying their appetite for that sort of material by giving them a whole bunch of fresh stuff along those lines. Not sure if that's the right way to think about it or if it would even work, but perhaps that's what's going through my little brain when I withhold bedding on these relatively new systems. Maybe next time maybe we'll just do a fresh top coating of leaves just to give the whole system a nice new refreshed look when we're done feeding next time. So that's the end of the check-in, everyone. I've got a few things that I need to take care of getting cleaned up and put away. But I'm not going to waste your time with that. That stuff's boring. Before I go really quick, let me just say thank you. Thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed the video. If you did, as always, please don't forget to leave me a quick thumbs up before you go. That's always really appreciated. And if you haven't done so already, please also consider subscribing to the channel. That's very much appreciated as well. All right, everyone. Thanks for watching. Have a great day. Bye now.